Well, now I want to turn to Phil Edholm for his segment on local clubs and NMRA divisions. And he has a really special local group for us this evening. Phil, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. I'd like to introduce some of the folks, and I've got to go find everyone here. So why don't you unmute if you're here's first is Greg Warth, and so I'm gonna actually let Greg come in and introduce everyone else as I bring them in. So Greg, why don't you tell us first just a little bit about yourselves and your kind of club and what you're doing, and we can then bring everybody else in and we can have a conversation.
Sure. Yeah, we kind of wear two hats. One of them is that we're the Tidewater Division of the MER, Mid-Atlantic or Mid-Eastern region. And so we have an active division. It's going pretty well. We have good meetings where we get educational videos and I think, a fairly large number of people attend. We'd like to get more. It's a fairly large area, so some of the guys, are way out in Elizabeth City, and they don't always make the meetings that are in Virginia Beach. But anyway, that's one hat, and our other hat that we wear, our little group here is that we're trying to get a model railroad museum started somewhere in the Hampton Roads area. And, we've been dealing with this or planning for this for about 2.5 years. We're into our third year. We're really trying to, we've been trying to find a place, a location for it. We've got all the planning done, the business plan and bylaws and all that stuff. We actually have our 501c3 so it's a nonprofit organization. We've been researching other model railroad museums across the country. We kind of look to the San Diego Model Railroad Museum as kind of a place that we'd like to emulate. So that's pretty much what we're up to. We don't have a location solidified yet, although we went out to Fort Monroe today, and there are a couple buildings out there that look pretty good. So we might consider one of those. But
so is this a building you're looking at acquiring then, or?
Yeah, well, it'll be a lease most likely, and so we've got to crunch some numbers and figure out whether there are enough people and visitors in the area that would make this museum viable. So that's what we're going to do now after looking at the buildings and seeing what's out there. But it's a beautiful area. Fort Monroe, I don't know if you've ever been down this way, but it's a nice tourist area. And, I think we might fit in pretty well there. Fred, feel free to pipe in.
So Greg, your role is you're kind of the leader of the band, so to speak?
Not really. Actually, Fred is the president, but and I'm the secretary. I'm kind of a contact person, but
that's good.
And then Gary Leiphart is a newer member of our group, but he brings a lot of talent with him, and he's more of our director of education, and that's something I wanted to emphasize is that we want this museum to be very educational. We want to use the STEM concept of teaching, science and technology, engineering, and mathematics. Mix the word STEM, and so and we want to invite local students in to build their own layouts, maybe a couple of them in our facility. We'll have about eight or nine different layouts, and they'll be all scales. GOH, all of them, HO, and even down to Z. So we think it'll be a really nice museum. It's going to be hopefully in a nice area. And I think it'll be a good thing for the community, the families. It's a good family thing to go to and visit. And so I'm very hopeful that we'll get it off the ground. I've over the past couple of years, I've heard a lot of naysayers saying, "Oh, you'll never do that." But I don't know. I think we're getting close to it. So I'm very positive about it.
So have you had any success trying to find, a city or, the thing about San Diego that's so interesting is that, they're in a location that the city had structures and was willing to dedicate those to different, call it for lack of a better word, artsy kind of things, because there are other things in that area, other museums and things in addition to, both the HO and the larger gauge layouts that are there.
Right.
Did you have any success trying to find, a civic entity to partner with, or because
we were very hopeful about that at first, and we did everything we could to try to get one of the cities to sponsor us or to give us a vacant building that or one that we could rent very inexpensively, but it just didn't pan out. We met with two of the mayors in the local cities, and the mayors seemed interested, and they wished us a lot of success, but they didn't have a building that they could
right?
give us. So we're pretty much down to trying to find a commercial place because there doesn't seem to be anything else. One of us is still working on the possibility of getting a city building, but I'm sort of losing hope in that. So that's why we hired a commercial broker, and he's been helping us go around and try to find a place. And maybe we found one today. I don't know. We'll have to see how the numbers work out.
Well, if you want office space, there's a lot available in San Francisco, I know. So
Oh yeah,
uh,
I know.
it's
It's kind of a
well,
long drive out
it's a
there.
long drive though. Uh, so Fred or Greg, tell a little bit about yourselves.
Well, I was the previous superintendent for the Tidewater Division at the Middle Eastern region, and I was the president during the pandemic stage. So there was a big lockdown, and consequently, the layout that we had in a shopping mall that we were in there rent free for 10 years, and the gentleman ended up not being the owner, and the new owners came in, and we left. So that kind of motivated us to get started to find a new location. And as we started looking, that's why we started looking at what would be a driver for us that would be something that we could sell to the community, sell to the cities, to help sponsor whatever we're doing. And that's why we went and did the research and found 18 museums across the United States. San Diego was our emphasis because one of our members that's on the board used to be a member of the San Diego Museum. So we were lucky enough to get documentation from them. And then as we did this research, we found Colorado, we found Greenville, South Carolina, which is the miniature world of model railroading. And they have a great website. We got a lot of knowledge from that. They even have planning and estimates posted on their website, and that was a great help. So once we saw all of that and we did the analysis of what all the museums are doing across the United States, we said the only way that we can become unique is nobody's doing all scales, all basic scales. We don't branch off to do narrow gauge, but we just stay with the basics. So that would give us Z to G. And then if we add the one or two layouts that the high school students or the middle grade students would build on their own using STEM from the ground up, That would give us around 10 to 11 layouts. And then if we get a wooden one for the little tots to play with, which is what we had at our last layout, it would go over pretty good. We had 26,000 viewers over 10 years looking at one layout, which was HO scale. And we had 4,000 square feet. And what we looked at today were two buildings that were just under 7,000 square feet. And we were impressed with what they were kind of offering, but we still got to run the numbers. So we're still
how many members do you have going into this? Because 7,000 square foot facility to put layouts in is a pretty big facility, even if a high schooler is building a small one, and
well,
still a lot of layout to be built.
We started 2 years ago of making interest to the other local clubs. And because several of the clubs are not getting young members, and the members that are there are starting to dwindle.
Yeah.
We were trying to get them interested in joining and having their clubs, because they were losing their spaces too, as a result of one reason or another. So if we could persuade them to come and be part of our museum, still have their own club, their own rules, they would still do their own thing. It's just that they would help us manage as volunteers to do the museum and have their layout so they could display it and still run op stations if they wanted to. The other thing is that we would want to offer free tours or free admission on Wednesdays to school systems, regardless of where they come from across the United States. It would be free for them and their chaperones. Yeah. And that was received very well by Virginia Beach mayor and the Chesapeake mayor. So we still haven't given up on Virginia Beach, because they have a vibe area that we're trying to see if we can't find something in the middle of the tourist area of the waterfront there, the ocean front. We're still looking within the two other cities, Chesapeake and Norfolk, because they have both major malls that have gone bankrupt. One of them's going to get completely torn down. We're trying to see if we can't push our way into one of the entertainment slots. We're looking at one of them in Norfolk to see if, as a nonprofit, can we get in there, because they just made a deal with another nonprofit. So we're trying to see if we can't wiggle our way in, maybe into that one also. So we got a lot of irons in the fire. We just need visibility to let people know that we are alive and well, and that we have a mission that we're trying to accomplish.
So this is a vague thought, and someone else on the new tracks in the community may know better. Clark Kooning, I think, went to a museum up in Ontario that's operated kind of as a community. You know, in other words, it's a large building with multiple layouts in it that are operated by different groups. I don't know if you've talked to them, but it might be interesting to talk to them, because they're actually running that kind of thing. Now, I think the structure may have been built by someone who had some money, but it was kind of done around the idea of, you have a big structure and you get 4 or 5 different groups to come in and build different layouts, so it might be worth talking to them and seeing, because that's a fairly interesting idea if you can find a large enough space for a reasonable cost. Have you had any success? You know, I think the challenge is, we all think about our clubs as being kind of recreational and for the members, which is kind of the way most of them got structured. The minute you go to being a 501c3 and that, you now can do fundraising. Have you done anything in terms of trying to define local fundraising, et cetera, either for the facility or for the layouts, getting them built?
Well, we were doing multi-phase effort on this museum. The first phase was just to get ourselves recognized by the proper authorities so that we could get the 501 and get the proper licenses for donations, admissions, and we did that. This year, our goal is, 1, to find a location, 2, start our donation drive for construction fund, so that we can start buying necessary materials. Because one of the things that we want to do is that if we can't get a club to come in and run their gauge, then we will build it. So we need money to buy that material so that we can have another layout. And I'll just use O gauge, for instance. Right now, we do have a commitment from a G gauge group, And we have a commitment from an HO group, and we have a commitment from an Engage group. So you can see that we have interest at this point. It's just that we've already started receiving material donations for Z, N, and H at this point. So we're starting to get some traction now that we're into year 3.
We started applying for grants as well, and we applied for one from CSX and plan to apply for some others from some of the other Class 1 railroads and maybe some Class 2 railroads, maybe some from some of the manufacturers, like Atlas or Aethern or one of those.
Yeah, one of the things, so I'm part of a club here in the Bay Area that's in a fairgrounds, and we have the kind of benefit of a traffic model that's profoundly different than most model railroads. In 19, we actually had about 65,000 visitors. So that kind of contrasts to Greeley was about 20,000, and I think San Diego is about 200 or something like that. So it'd give you an idea of, and so it ended up getting a lot of visitors, and we've gone through, because the fairgrounds out here are all going through the same process of getting all of the non-paying customers or non-paying entities off of the facility and becoming more event centers and corporate folks, et cetera. And there's all, and actually it makes sense because they're not getting the financial support from the counties, et cetera. So, but the net result is we had to start about 4 years ago looking at the potential of losing the facility, and either potentially getting a piece of land on the fairgrounds to have to build a new building, because the building is actually a 50, 60-year-old stables that was abandoned as a stables 40 years ago and turned into a model railroad. I think they actually swept the floor when they took the horses out, but that was about it. No insulation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so it would actually not necessarily be undesirable to get a new building, but the problem is when you start looking at building a building, you're talking $400,000 to $500,000 real quickly, with ADA compliance and all the other things you've got to build in. One of the things we realized was that there was no way you could do that on membership dues. We actually do great fundraising now, because we get donations during the fair with those people, but even that is not really significant to the cost structure of building a new building, or even building a new layout and replacing what was built over 40 years by literally hundreds of contributors. And so the conclusion we came to is the only way to do it, you've got to get corporate sponsors. And the best way we could figure it, we didn't do this was a thought process, was to go out and basically sell square foots. So the idea is, if you do a $20,000 sponsorship, you get your name on the wall, but we'll also custom build a square foot model of one of your buildings on the layout illuminated, so you get the double advertisement. I think it's a real challenge to figure out how do you go to corporate sponsors, because raising $300,000 or $400,000 is, and that's the cost point. A lot of these things you're looking at, it's hard to do $5 at a time. You've got to get some big donors.
Right.
I think one of the ways that we're going to achieve that is that, what was it, about 9 weeks ago, we went to the Chamber of Commerce in Hampton Roads. And they were very appreciative, very supportive, and they kind of went along the same theme that you just discussed, that the way that you get backing and volunteers from the Chamber of Commerce is you got to have a location, and once you get the location, you're going to be able to rub elbows at a dinner, and it'll be amazing what you can get done, but you got to have a location in order to.
You've got to have a plan and a location and what it's going to be
right.
in a proposal form. Unless you have details, it tends not to work. But
So we're hopeful that once we identify a location, then once we seal that deal, it's like the movie. They will come once they see the ball field.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know years ago there was a company that used to sell a map of Silicon Valley, and they would go around to all the companies in Silicon Valley and they'd charge them a couple of grand or something, $5,000 to get your building on the map. And the more you paid, the bigger the bill. It's kind of that idea of, you're on the map. You do something for the city. Maybe one of the layouts, you do an area that's kind of a representative model, and you put in some of the local businesses. It seems to me that that's, you know, when you take a big effort like you guys are doing, you got to figure out how to get that financial assistance from outside of the railroad community. It's just, we just can't afford it anymore. So
But one of the things that we are doing, that's in the plan, that's in the works, is a model railroad club called the Cape Henry Model Railroad Club. And what it will do is one of the layouts will depict the railroad system from Norfolk into Virginia Beach that went down to the Chamberlain Hotel in the 20s and 30s or 40s, because that was the major go-to place on the ocean front in those days. And that portion will be part of our local history that we're going to put into one of the layouts. And then, and we don't know which scale it'll be on, but we've already started working on the bylaws for that club to get instated so that they can be part of the effort.
you know, the other thing would be on the O side, look for an ON30 group. I know you didn't talk about narrow gauge, but you know, you might find an ON30 modular group that would find the potential of a permanent home location to be desirable, versus traipsing to shows. And you know, there are a number of those. I know the Eastern Loggers, for example, you know, they just found a home for their modular layout. I know the YSL out here, and there are some of these kind of semi-modular or what we'll call sectional layouts, like the Eastern Loggers, the YSL, which was the Yosemite short line built back for one of the narrow gauge. Those were not modular, but they were built sectional to be assembled in a specific configuration. And there are a few of those layouts around that might be interesting to see about trying to arrange one. Like I said, the Eastern Modelers, the Eastern Loggers, I think they put their layout in a museum up, a logging museum. But it might be worth, because you might be able to find someone who has a layout already built where, you know, they can take it in, set it up, maybe help with maintenance, but over time, just turn it over to somebody more local. I know like I said, the YSL, I know the YSL guys here, and the YSL is a, you know, fairly well reputed, built by a number of, you know, well-known modelers, and they're very much trying to find a place for a home for it, because setting it up and tearing it down just over time, it's very hard on it. It wasn't built for that. So you might find one like that if you looked around. Once you got a location, it becomes a lot easier. Location is everything.
Well, it just so happens that we have two gauges that are sort of in that situation. We have an O gauge club that has a layout above the store, a train store. They're up on the second floor. And then there's another group that's S gauge. And both of them are looking for some place to put their traveling show. And I looked at a building that had 9 stalls, which happened to be an old Kmart.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, I don't have the dollars to support the square footage that would allow us to go that extra mile to put traveling shows in these stalls so that those clubs would be able to work on them, have space to repair them at the same time that they have a layout in the museum, and they'd be able to go out and go their wares wherever they want to.
Right.
But that's pie in the sky.
Well, cool. Well, guys, I really appreciate it. I think it's very interesting, you know, because you're in the process of doing something that a lot of people think about. And I mean, your comment was an interesting comment at the very beginning. You know, in terms of a Don Quixote journey, there have been 18 successes, you know, 350 million people. You know, so clearly creating a model railroad museum is not something that's for the faint of heart. So wish you all the best, and thanks for coming and talking to us, and look forward. And when you get closer, obviously ask for our help. So back to you, Jim. Any questions?
Yeah, I do, because I used to be a member of this division. That goes back 20 some odd years ago.
And then why haven't I seen you?
And I'm a life member of the MER. They don't offer that anymore, but they did when I joined, at least. So I have some strong feelings, positive feelings about the division. When I was a member of your division, there was a city, and it's been 20 some odd years, I forget the name. There was a city that the division took on, and a bunch of people from the division in effect, built a layout in, I think it was the old train depot in this city.
It
Suffolk.
was in Suffolk, Virginia.
That's
the
it.
CSX depot.
That's it. And the city fathers were behind it. I mean, it was really a solid project. Now, I don't know whatever happened to that, whether it still exists or not. But at least when I was part of the division funded it and really supported that project 100%, and something really all the members were proud of.
We support it.
Still maintains it.
We support it today. As a matter of fact, so far this year and the tail end of last year, we've cleaned up, repaired, and did maintenance on all of their engines for them. We checked the wiring of the layout last year, and we're looking at a schoolhouse, which is 2 blocks from that depot that has been vacated, and it has lots of room in it. So far, only a couple of tenants have moved in, so we're trying to see if there's a possibility we might be able to get into that schoolhouse, which would be just down the road, because they're already interested in tourism, because tourism supports that depot.
Exactly. And like I say, back then, at least the city fathers, all of them were behind it. They supported us. I mean, we couldn't have asked for any better support, as I remember it, from any governmental organization.
Just to give you an idea of how we're still involved, at this particular time, the division has stepped up and is building a diorama for the Lee Hall train station and museum. They're also restoring a passenger car that was used during the war for wounded soldiers. They're restoring that. And we're going to have a diorama up on the 2nd floor of where the clerk was. And it's like about a 42-inch square diorama from the 1920s. Matter of fact, this house is going to go in that diorama as soon as I finish it. This is the one that I'm working on right now. We also helped the Virginia Beach City with 2 dioramas to support the police department and the fire department, because we took a busy intersection. If you're from this area, you'll know that the street of Virginia Beach Boulevard and Independence is a very congested area. And the police wanted that if there was ever a train accident, how would they handle the situation? So we built them this diorama of that particular area, and they used it for many years, and the fire department used it also. So we are very community oriented in supporting it with the model railroading.
And because of the division's history in doing that kind of thing, it ought to stand you in good stead for showing people that you can produce a major project, because that Suffolk station, as I remember it, that was a significant contribution that the division made, not only in money. The money was a small part of it. It was the people time that from the division members that made that layout possible. And that has to be remembered by the politicians. I mean, that's something that you ought to be very, very proud of, in my opinion.
We also supported the Children's Museum in Portsmouth, Virginia, when they built that and was trying to get the O-gauge trains that they got that was a collection from Mike the Trainland store that was out in Suffolk. When he passed away, his family donated all that stuff to the Children's Museum, and the division went over and helped build that.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with your project. Possibly your members can support us with our scholarship program. We sure hope so.
That was very interesting. I was very enlightening when I heard that. So that's
well,
a nice step.
Yeah, besides Walters is the first model railroad company that came out with a scholarship program last year. And one of the members here, Greg Cassidy, belongs to a local club that because of Walters, and I think partially because of our endorsement of Walters and encouraging other organizations to consider it, this club started a scholarship program within their local area. ours is the only one that involves a STEAM program. And the reason that we included art in it is we believe that the STEAM portions of the college education is important, but for our purposes and because we're model railroaders, we believe that art is also critical skill, particularly for model railroaders that they acquire. And therefore, we support the STEAM program, which includes the art part of it, particularly because the art part in most colleges includes 3D printing and that kind of thing, and CAD programs and all of that kind of new technology that in our opinion is the future of model railroading to a large extent. So we would encourage you to consider the STEAM part of it rather than just the STEM. But if anything that you could do to help us promote our scholarship, then we certainly will reciprocate and try to do whatever we can to accommodate you and help you support your project. I don't know exactly how we could work together doing that, but I'm sure open to a discussion of it if you all would like to talk further privately about it.
Yeah,
We welcome that opportunity.
I think one of the things that we don't do well, and I spent a bit of time and have been involved with the NMRA Museum in Sacramento, and we don't do well talking about how model railroading is a great hobby for life.
Absolutely.
When you're younger, you learn skills that can help you not just in model railroading, but generally in life, whether it's, to do other things or in career. Okay, a lot of things that people learn in model railroading ends up being career value for them, depending on their career. And then later in life, it's a really important part of maintaining, a social group and keeping busy and keeping engaged and keeping thinking and all the things that Tom are important. So, it might be worth thinking about, as part of a model railroading museum, talking about, the hobby in that way. We tend to think about the hobby kind of in our view, but not in terms of how do you, to tell people this is something you should think about. Even though you haven't thought about it, it's not just playing with trains. It really is. It's engineering. Something where you show the aspects of it. Most people don't understand. You look at what Tom's building, and go through the variety of what I'll call STEAM skills, right? So if you look at STEAM, science, technology, science, you got to understand paint formulation. You got to understand technology. How does STEAM apply in model railroad? How does participating in model railroad prepare you for careers that are STEAM focused? So I think that could be a really interesting thought process to expand expand beyond the model railroading view, but to kind of the hobby as a valuable asset in a community.
That's right.
Anyway, enough said.
We're looking at the school system to see if as we're trying to generate interest with the younger generations to help fill the voids as the older generations move on, that the schools may end up at some point agreeing with us under the STEM or STEAM, so that maybe we can get some kind of agreement or coordination of credits somehow if they build these layouts, and the schools will recognize their achievements.
Oh, absolutely.
That's something to work on.
I think that's a fantastic idea, and that sounds fantastic to me. I will say this to you. You talk about getting corporate support. The reason that I agreed to be the ambassador for the Association of Professional Model Makers is that the association and I both believe that the education and the abilities that model railroaders have, young model railroaders, gives them the skill and the talent if they want to continue as a professional model maker. Therefore, you're opening the doors then to professional model makers in most major corporations, because they either have in-house staff or they subcontract it out to other model making organizations. And what this allows you to do then is to bring that group of people and those corporations into the feeling that they need to support this because this could be their future employee base. And that organization, the major thing that they told me when I first found them and we started talking, and I agreed to be the ambassador for them to model railroading, was their members had trouble today finding employees, qualified employees at the entry level. Mm-hmm. Well, that to me is model railroaders. And model railroaders are all over the country. They're all over Canadian provinces. They're all over the world. And that to me was the entree. And that's why we had our banner and promoted our scholarship at their annual convention that they just had in Dayton, Ohio. Because exposing ourselves and our programs and our desires to help young model railroaders, we want that corporate support. We want that money. We want that corporate support and enthusiasm for what we're trying to do. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in that, I'll be glad to make some introductions for you. Because I do think that could be a way in to a lot of corporations that possibly you're not even thinking about.
Absolutely.
We're going to take you up on that.
That's fine. My email, Fred, whoever would like to follow this up, my email is jimkellow, JIMKELLOW, at New Tracks Modeling, MODELING.com. And if you'll just send me an email, then maybe we can change telephone numbers and then talk. I do better on the telephone than I do email. Phil will tell you that I'm probably one of the few people that when you get my emails, you have to run it through spell check to understand what I'm saying.
Well, we thank you for the opportunity to speak to everybody and listen to our quest of the future and how we want to bring the young folks into this modeling effort. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Phil did a great job. The interview, and thank you so much, and look forward to talking with you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.